Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed to Legacy of Survival and, share this channel with anyone who still believes food security is something governments will always handle for them. What we cover here is not entertainment. It's accumulated human experience, tested under the worst conditions modern societies have ever endured. If you want a single minute that locks you in, here it is. During the Second World War, millions of civilians survived for years on food systems designed not for comfort, not for abundance, but for continuity. Not for weeks, not for emergencies, for years. That is the part modern preparedness culture keeps missing. WWII rationing wasn't a temporary hardship, it was a permanent operating system. People built lives, raised children, worked brutal industrial shifts, and maintained health under conditions where food scarcity was assumed to be normal. If you want to understand real food security, not, theoretical stockpiling fantasies, WWII rationing is one of the most brutally honest case studies ever recorded. And if you understand it properly, it changes how you think about food forever. Why perennial rationing worked? Because it was designed as a system, not a stash. The first lesson modern preppers often miss is that WWII rationing was not about hoarding food, but about managing flow. In Britain, under the oversight of the Ministry of Food, rationing was engineered to guarantee long-term nutritional adequacy, not short-term comfort. Calories, protein, fats and vitamins were tracked continuously, adjusted seasonally and redistributed based on availability. This meant people didn't rely on stored excess. They relied on predictable access. Applied today, this means shifting your mindset away from massive stockpiles that eventually expire and toward rotational food systems. Build a pantry where nothing sits untouched. Eat what you store what you eat, and measure consumption monthly instead of guessing yearly. How nutrient prioritization kept populations healthy under scarcity. One of the most uncomfortable truths for modern audiences is that wartime rationing often improved public health. In Britain, rates of malnutrition-related illness declined despite shortages. The reason was ruthless prioritization. Sugar, fats and luxury foods were cut aggressively, while protein, dairy and vegetables were protected whenever possible. People learned to meet nutritional requirements with fewer calories and, less variety. Applying this today means learning the difference between survival nutrition and comfort eating. Practice building meals around nutrient density rather than just taste. For example, try replacing your reliance on processed carbohydrates with legumes, root vegetables and preserved greens. Learn how many grams of protein and fat your body truly needs to function, not simply how much you enjoy consuming. Why local production mattered more than imports. Wartime rationing exposed just how fragile global food chains really are. When shipping lanes were threatened, imported food became unreliable overnight. Victory gardens, allotments and small-scale animal husbandry were not hobbies. They were, in fact, survival infrastructure. Families who could supplement rations with local production, they fared better both psychologically and physically. The lesson here is, honestly, brutally relevant. If your food security plan depends entirely on distant supply chains, it is not really a plan at all. Even small-scale production matters, you know. Growing potatoes, beans, leafy greens, or keeping just a few chickens, look, it doesn't make you self-sufficient, but it does stretch ration supplies dramatically. Start small, but start now, because, believe me, skills compound faster than stored calories ever will. Now, let me tell you, substitution culture really did wonders for preserving both morale and calories during those tough times. Wartime civilians, well, they became absolute masters of substitution. Coffee, for example, was swapped out for chicory. Butter? That became margarine. And meat? Well, it often ended up as stews, stretched with grains and vegetables to make it go further. This wasn't just some nostalgic improvisation, you know. It was a learned survival skill, plain and simple. Folks trained themselves, sometimes quite deliberately, to accept alternatives without any real resentment. That sort of psychological flexibility, honestly, is what kept societies ticking over and functional, even when scarcity dragged on for years. So, in practical terms today, what this means is you should try deliberately practicing substitution before you're ever forced to do it. Go ahead and rotate alternative ingredients into your regular meals. Learn recipes that work without wheat, without meat, and even without sugar. It's a good habit, really, and it might just come in handy one day. You know, when scarcity hits, the people who adapt the fastest are not the ones with the biggest pantry, but the ones whose expectations are already calibrated. Why ration books enforced discipline without chaos? Ration books were more than just bureaucratic paperwork. They created structure, fairness, and predictability. Everyone knew what they were entitled to and when. Black markets existed, sure, but they never replaced the official system. Modern preppers often resist structure, preferring individual freedom over coordination. But WWII teaches the opposite lesson. Discipline is what prevents panic. So, apply this by creating household ration plans even during normal times. It's important to track your consumption honestly, making sure you're not just guessing. Set limits, even when there's plenty around, because that's how you build real resilience. You know, discipline that's practiced voluntarily is far, far easier than discipline that's forced on you by a crisis. It's just a fact of life. Here's the thing. Preservation skills actually extended rationing, sometimes indefinitely. Canning, drying, pickling and fermentation weren't just hobbies back then. They were true extensions of rationing itself. Folks would lock in seasonal surpluses for the lean months ahead. Families, well, they understood shelf life almost instinctively. And honestly, food waste was just socially unacceptable. These days, most folks, well, they rely on industry to handle all of their food preservation. But, you know, relearning these old skills can really boost your food security straight away. Just start with one method, really. Maybe learn how to safely pressure can proteins, or try fermenting vegetables for winter storage. Each new skill you pick up, it just makes you that much less dependent on those, fragile supply systems. Now, Why did rationing assume the crisis would last longer than anyone expected? Well, the most important lesson here is honestly a bit philosophical. During the Second World War, rationing was built on the idea that there would be no quick resolution. Both governments and civilians, they planned for endurance, not for relief. And really, that assumption shaped every single decision they made. These days, modern preparedness culture often assumes that disruptions are just temporary. But if we look at history, it says otherwise. The real trick is to build systems that can function indefinitely, even if that means doing so at reduced comfort, right? If your plan only works for, say, 6 months, then honestly, it isn't really a plan at all. It's just a countdown. So, if this kind of historically grounded survival knowledge matters to you, do consider subscribing to Legacy of Survival. Share this video with other serious thinkers, and help keep these lessons alive. History has already paid the price for this knowledge. Our job now is to learn from it before we have to.